Venice's Grand Canal. Venice, a city built on an island and laced with canals, is best seen by boat. So take a nautical joyride down the Grand Canal as it snakes through the heart of Venice and see what makes this city so unique. Hi, I'm Rick Steves. Thanks for joining me on a trip by public vaporetto from the train station to St. Mark's Square. Along the way, we'll pass by once grand, now fading palaces from Venice's glory days. We'll sail under bridges, including the famous Arch of the Rialto Bridge, and see churches with soaring domes and markets with stinky squid. The wide boulevard of water called the Grand Canal is a sight in itself. And we'll share the road with the everyday working boats that keep this island city going. For specifics on boat tickets, passes, and routes, consult a good guidebook. Now, allow about 45 minutes for the boat trip as we get a first-hand, sea-level view of the greatest sight in all of Venice, the city itself. How to use this audio guide. As you can see from the display window on your MP3 player, each of the Grand Canal's boat stops has its own track number, much like the song tracks on a music CD. We'll see the sights in order along the route the boat takes. But navigating down the Grand Canal can be a bit confusing. So to help you along, I've invited my colleague, Lisa Brown. Welcome, Lisa.
Buongiorno.
She'll help us keep pace with the boat's journey. After listening to her directions, you can pause the audio guide, then restart it at the next track, as instructed, when the boat is at the next stop. Be aware that, even with the very best of directions, sightseeing the Grand Canal can be confusing. Buildings can be covered with scaffolding. The boat might make unplanned stops or skip other stops altogether. Most of all, the boat travels at its own pace, which may be either faster or slower than my commentary. If you're taking this tour with my Rick Steves Audio Europe app, don't miss its latest features. There are zoomable maps showing the route and each stop. These are viewable while you listen. A 20-second rewind button allows you to catch something you might have missed or hear vital directions a second time. And the speed button makes me talk faster, chipmunk style. You can read the actual script of this tour, and if you'd like more information on the spot, you can download our entire guidebook on this destination with a couple of clicks. Those following this tour on their iPod rather than with my fancier app may find that my guidebook to this place, with its maps, photos, and exhibit titles, can make following this audio tour easier. Above all, be flexible. Now, let's catch our boat and head down the Canale Grande. Ahoy, Lisa. Take it away.
Thanks, matey.
The tour begins. The train station.
Our journey is on a public transit bus boat called a vaporetto. This tour is designed for the slow boat, Vaporetto Line 1, which travels from the train station to St. Mark's Square, making all the stops in about 45 minutes. Another line, the number 82, follows the same route and passes by the same sites, but it makes the route much faster than this audio guide. To do this audio guide, you must use the slower line number 1.
By the way, if you're arriving by car, you could catch Vaporetto number 1 upstream 2 stops at the Tronchetto parking lot. And those arriving on the airport shuttle bus can catch it 1 stop upstream at Piazzale Roma. But we're assuming you've arrived by train or are already in town, so we're starting in front of the train station.
Catch Vaporetto number 1 from the docks right outside the main Santa Lucia train station. The stop is called Ferrovia. There are several different docks for different Vaporetto lines going different directions. Make sure you're on Vaporetto number 1 and confirm that your particular boat is going all the way to St. Mark's Square.
Before you board, ask the conductor, per San Marco? That means to St. Mark's. Ideally, you'll want a seat in the front of the boat for the best views. Next best is standing along the rail on the left side. But boats can be very crowded, so just find a spot where you can, and perhaps jockey yourself into a better position as people get off the boat. You'll enjoy the fewest crowds and the best light by riding late in the day. Sunset bathes the buildings in gold, and nighttime brings its own magic and no crowds. By the way, your Vaporetto ticket is good for an hour. If the spirit moves you, hit pause, hop off, and explore. Boats come by about every 10 minutes. Be aware that for this audio-guided tour, your sightseeing pace will be totally at the mercy of how fast your boat makes the trip. The boat may speed by sites you'd want to linger at, or stop at a dock for a few minutes at a time when you're anxious to move on. While I've made every effort to match this commentary to your real-time trip, you'll have to be flexible. You'll need to pause your audio guide or jump to the next track as dictated by the captain's speed.
Notice that each track is labeled with the names of Vaporetto stops. Rick's commentary describes what you see from there and what you pass by as you cruise to the next stop. As we go, listen carefully. I'll help keep you on pace. Start at the docks outside the Santa Lucia train station. Find the boat dock for Vaporetto number 1, in direction of San Marco. When you buy your ticket, consider buying a pass, which can be worth it even if you're only planning on one more boat ride.
As you wait for your boat, check out the scene. Venice is a barrage on the senses. Water, boats, tourists with luggage, locals with briefcases, old decrepit buildings, modern bustle. If this is your first look at Venice, take a second before you board to soak it in. Relax, enjoy. But the minute your boat comes, be prepared to hop on it and start the next track. The train station, built in 1954, is one of the few modern buildings in town. This area has been the gateway into Venice since 1860, when the causeway was built, finally connecting this island city to the mainland 2 miles away. The FS over the door stands for Ferrovia dello Stato, the Italian state railway system. Over 20,000 people a day commute in from the mainland, making this the busiest part of Venice during rush hour. Opposite the train station, on the other side of the canal, is the green dome of the Church of San Simeone Piccolo. On top of the dome, that's St. Simeon, waving at whoever enters or leaves the city. Ciao! Our trip will cut right through this island, which is shaped like a fish. We start at the fish's mouth, snake down past the heart at the Rialto Bridge, and end up in the belly at St. Mark's Square. Okay, park your 21st century perspective right here at the mouth and let Venice swallow you whole.
Now, board Vaporetto number 1. Find a place to sit or stand and start the next track as the boat leaves the dock.
Ferrovia. The boat departs. The GrandCanal, Venice's main street, is truly grand. At more than 2 miles long, 150 feet wide, and nearly 15 feet deep, it's the city's largest canal, lined with its most impressive palaces. As you cruise the canal, think about how Venice was formed. Long ago, the channel that is now the Grand Canal was once a freshwater river that spilled from the mainland into the Adriatic Sea. That river's sediment created a delta, which became the marshy islands of Venice. The fish-shaped Isle of Venice is actually about 100 tiny islands, laced with 25 miles of canals and connected with some 400 bridges. Of Venice's many canals, only the 3 largest are officially called canals: the Grand Canal, the Giudecca, and the Cannaregio. The scores of other smaller waterways that empty like streams into the Grand Canal are referred to as rivers: Rio Nuovo, Rio Terra, and so on. With all this water, it's no wonder that Venice is known as the Bride of the Sea. From the train station, we leave modern Venice and enter the part that's been unchanged since the city's heyday. From around 1100 to 1500, this was Europe's richest city. Venice grew wealthy as the middleman in trade between Europe and Asia. Merchants and sleek ships sailed the Mediterranean, then returned here to cruise down the Grand Canal. They'd unload their goods and resell them at an enormous profit. The grand palaces that line the canal are a testament to those glory days.
The next stop is Riva de Biasio. Pause the audio guide and restart it as soon as the boat leaves the dock.
By the way, Lisa's instructions on exactly when to start the audio guide are important for you to keep this tour in sync with your boat's captain. Riva di Biasio. As the boat leaves, look immediately to the left down a broad side canal. Way in the distance, you can glimpse two tall, pale pink buildings. These 6-story twin towers mark what was the Jewish ghetto. It's a reminder of how densely populated that closed-off neighborhood was. Set aside as the local Jewish quarter in 1516, it became one of the most closely knit of all the Jewish communities in Italy. It was located near a copper foundry, or ghetto, giving us our English word for a segregated neighborhood. In other words, this was the original ghetto. As you cruise the canal, you'll notice that Venice's main thoroughfare is busy with all kinds of boats. Taxis, police boats, garbage boats, ambulances, construction cranes, floating hearses, and even brown and white UPS boats. These are what keep this island city going, and somehow they all manage to share the watery road in relative peace.
The next stop is San Marcuola. There are a couple of sites visible even while the Vaporetto is docked here, so start the next track as soon as the boat reaches the San Marcuola stop.
San Marcuola. At this stop, facing a tiny square just ahead, stands the unfinished church of San Marcuola, one of only 5 churches fronting the Grand Canal. The Grand Canal was not a religious area, but rather a commercial drag of expensive real estate in high demand by wealthy merchants. About 20 yards further down the Grand Canal on the right-hand side is a stately gray building. This was one of the busiest corporate offices, the Turkish Exchange, or Fondaco, one of the oldest palaces in Venice. Its horseshoe arches and roofline of triangles and dingle balls are reminders of its Byzantine heritage. Turkish traders in turbans docked here, unloaded their goods into the warehouse on the bottom story, then went upstairs for a home-style meal, a little hookah, and a place to sleep. Venice in the 1500s was very cosmopolitan, welcoming every religion and ethnicity as long as they carried cash. As you cruise on, look to the left side of the canal, about 100 yards down. This is Venice's casino. On the brick wall, a white plaque shows a man's strong-jawed profile, marking this as the place where the German composer Richard Wagner died in 1883. 2 centuries ago, Venice was Europe's Las Vegas, with casinos and prostitutes everywhere. Today, the casino, or Little House in Italian, is run by the state to keep mafia influence at bay. Notice the fancy front porch rolling out the red carpet for high rollers arriving by taxi or hotel boat.
The next stop is San Ste. Start the next track as soon as the boat reaches the dock.
San Ste. The San Ste Church sports a delightful Baroque facade. Opposite the San Ste stop, look at the lower stories of the buildings, where you might see the scant remains of some peeling plaster. This plaster was once colorful frescoes or painted plaster, which covered many of the city's palaces. Just a little further down the Grand Canal, jutting out a bit on the right, is the ornate white facade of Ca' Pesaro. Ca is short for casa, or house. Because only the house of the Doge could be called a palace or palazzo, all other Venetian palaces are technically Ca', just fancy houses. As you pass by the Ca' Pesaro, look back to see the side of the building. In this city of masks, rich marble facades, like the Ca' Pesaro's, often mask what are generally just simple, no-nonsense brick buildings. Most merchants, being smart business people, decorated their buildings only on one side, building a glorious facade facing the canal where everyone could see it. But this is a rare building with a fine side facade as well. Today, the Ca' Pesaro houses a museum of modern paintings by the likes of Klimt, Chagall, and Kandinsky.
Ahead on the left, just before you reach the next stop, is a glorious palace with a triple-decker medieval arcade, the Ca' d'Oro. Start the next track when you get a good view of the Ca' d'Oro as you make the approach to the Ca' d'Oro Vaporetto stop.
Ca' d'Oro. The Lacy Ca d'Oro, or House of Gold, was named for the gold trim that once adorned it. Even today, it's impressive, with 2 different balconies and a spiny white roofline. The Ca d'Oro is the best example of Venetian Gothic architecture on the canal. Venetian Gothic mixes the traditional pointed arch of Northern Gothic with Byzantine and local styles. So, you'll see pointed arches, topped with round medallions, stamped with a 4-leaf clover. In the Byzantine style, the columns are thin, and the arches on top of them are tall and narrow. All this is filled in with Islamic-style frills. Imagine the Ca d'Oro in its 14th century heyday, painted and gilded to make it even more glorious than it is now. Today, the Ca d'Oro functions as an art gallery. As the boat leaves the dock and continues on, you'll see still more palaces. Back when Venice was the world's richest city, the Grand Canal was a Venetian chorus line of palaces doing an impressive architectural can-can. Imagine the facades at their finest, frescoed in reds and blues, with black and white borders and gold leaf trim. They made Venice a city of dazzling color. As bright as the city is today, it's still only a faded, sepia-toned remnant of a long-gone era. On the right is the arcade of the covered fish market, with the open-air produce market just beyond. Find the traghetto. That's the black, gondola-like boat going back and forth across the canal, shuttling shoppers who stand like Washington crossing the Delaware. Since only 4 bridges cross the Grand Canal, there are 7 traghetto crossings. They're marked by low-key green and black signs. Make a point to take advantage of these handy boats. You'll feel like a local. And at less than €1 a ride, it's one of the best deals in Venice.
Next stop is Mercato Rialto, along the right side of the canal. Start the next track when you reach the Mercato Rialto stop.
Mercato Rialto. Venice's colorful open-air market, or mercato, bustles in the morning, but it's quiet the rest of the day. This is a great scene to wander through, full of locals buying their cuttlefish, calamari, soft-shelled crabs, and other delightful delicacies. European Union hygiene standards recently required a remodeling job that left the market cleaner, but less colorful. That long and officious-looking building at this stop is the Venice Courthouse. Straight ahead, in the distance, rising above the big building across the canal, you can just see the tip of a bell tower crowned by its golden angel. That tower sits on St. Mark's Square. That's where this tour will end. As the boat leaves the Mercato Rialto dock and continues on, look to the left side of the canal. The big building up ahead is today's post office, often with Servizio Postale boats moored at its blue posts. In the 1500s, this building was the German Exchange, the trading center for German metal merchants. On the right, you'll cruise by some trendy and beautifully situated wine bars. As you round the corner, you're met with one of Venice's most impressive views, the Rialto Bridge. A major landmark of Venice, the bridge is lined with shops and tourists. It's the 3rd bridge built on this spot, built in 1588. With a span of 160 feet and foundations stretching more than 600 feet on either side, the Rialto was an impressive engineering feat in its day. As you pass under the fat arch of the bridge, notice the echoes. Gondoliers take full advantage of its acoustics. Volare, whoa, whoa, oh, 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 oh. Until the 1850s, the Rialto was the only bridge crossing the Grand Canal. Earlier Rialto bridges could open to let big ships in, but not this one. When this new bridge was completed, the stretch of the Grand Canal you just cruised was closed to shipping and became a canal of palaces.
After passing under the bridge, you approach the Rialto Vaporetto stop. Rialto is the geographic and commercial center of Venice, probably the busiest stop on your tour. Keep on listening to Rick's commentary as the boat unloads and loads passengers.
Rialto. Rialto, a separate town in the early days of Venice, has always been the commercial district, while San Marco was the religious and governmental center. Today, a winding street called the Merceria connects the two, providing travelers with human traffic jams and a mesmerizing gauntlet of shopping temptations. From the 12th to the 16th centuries, when Venice traded with both Northern Europe and Asia, Rialto was the center of the action. Germans in fur coats mingled with Muslims in silk robes. They exchanged English iron for Persian rugs, and Austrian salt for Turkish pepper. Notice that this is the only stretch of the historic Grand Canal with sidewalks, or quays, lining the water. In former days, this is where they unloaded the city's basic necessities: oil, wine, charcoal, iron, and so on. Today, the quays, lined with tourist trap restaurants, unload the wallets of visitors. The area near the Rialto dock is popular with gondolas. With about 500 gondoliers joyriding amid the churning vaporetti, there's a lot of congestion, and this is where many accidents take place. Watch your vaporetto driver curse those gondoliers, who make more money. As your boat continues down the canal, about 100 yards further on the left, are two well-preserved palaces standing side by side. Their arched windows are similar, and their stories are the same height, lining up to create the effect of one long balcony. Today, these two palaces serve as the city hall and the mayor's office.
Next stop is San Silvestro. Continue listening as the boat docks and then carries on.
San Silvestro. We now enter a long stretch of important merchants' palaces, each with proud and distinct facades. Since ships couldn't navigate beyond the Rialto Bridge, the biggest palaces, with the major shipping needs, lined this last navigable stretch of the Grand Canal. Palaces like these were multifunctional. On the ground floor where the boats docked were the warehouses where they unloaded goods. Offices, showrooms, and living quarters were above that, on the so-called noble floors. Those are the middle stories with the biggest windows to allow in maximum light. Servants lived and worked on the very top floors with the smallest windows. For fire safety reasons, the kitchens were also located on the top floors. As you cruise along, peek into the noble floors to catch a glimpse of their still glorious chandeliers of Murano glass. This cruise is the only way to really appreciate the Grand Canal's palaces. We approach them at water level, just as merchants did in former times where their main entrances are located. Many of these grand buildings are now vacant. Others harbor chandeliered elegance above mossy, empty, and often flooded ground floors. Today, strict laws prohibit any changes in these buildings, so while landowners gnash their teeth, we can enjoy Europe's best-preserved medieval city, slowly rotting.
Pause the audio guide and restart it when you reach the Sant'Angelo stop.
Sant'Angelo. The Grand Canal's palaces, like much of the city, had to be built on top of wooden pilings driven nearly 15 feet into the marshy clay soil. Above that, as you can see on many buildings, sat a foundation of white stone. This local stone, called pietra d'Istria, provides a waterproof base. On top of that, the mostly brick structure can sit high and dry. Even so, many canal-level floors are abandoned today, as the rising water level takes its toll. Along the docks, the posts where you'd tie up your boat are often painted with colorful designs. In former times, these colors were the equivalent of the family's coat of arms. The posts don't rot underwater. Water actually preserves wood. Rotting does occur at the waterline, where the wood is exposed to the air.
Start the next track when you reach the San Tomas stop. Get a head start on Rick's commentary because once the boat pulls away from the San Tomas dock, you'll encounter 3 sites in quick succession, all on the right-hand side. The Palazzo Balbi, a side canal with a fire station, and the large Ca Foscari.
San Thomas. 50 yards past the San Thomas stop, on the right-hand side, find the Palazzo Balbi, with twin obelisks on the rooftop. Obelisks like these honored great admirals of seafaring Venice. Today, the palace houses the regional government. The three flags are the green, white, and red of Italy, the blue with ring of stars, the European Union, and the flag of Venice, red and gold with the lion. Immediately past the Palazzo Balbi, look to the right around the corner down the side canal. On the right of that canal, before the bridge, see the traffic light? That's to direct traffic for the fire station, the building with 4 arches hiding fireboats parked and ready to go. Next up, dominating the bend in the Grand Canal, is the impressive Ca' Foscari with a classic Venetian facade. Ca' Foscari is now the main building of the University of Venice, which has about 25,000 students. Further up the canal, also on the right, is the grand, heavy, white Ca' Rezzonico. It's designed by the architect Longhena, who we'll meet up with again later. The Ca' Rezzonico now houses the Museum of 18th Century Venice. Across the canal from the Ca' Rezzonico, and a bit behind you, is the cleaner and leaner Palazzo Grassi. It was the last major palace built on the canal, erected in the late 1700s and recently purchased by a French tycoon.
Start the next track as your boat pulls away from the Ca' Rezzonico stop.
Ca' Rezzonico. Up ahead, you'll see the Accademia Bridge arching over the Grand Canal. The wooden bridge was put up in the 1930s as a temporary one. Locals liked it, so it stayed. This is one of the few modern structures in a city constrained by laws to preserve its historic ambiance. That's great for tourists, but imagine actually living in Venice and trying to raise a family. Apartments are small, high up, and really expensive. A 1,000-square-foot studio can sell for up to $1 million. Humidity and occasional flooding make basic maintenance a pain. Home improvement projects require navigating miles of red tape. Everything is expensive since it has to be shipped in from the mainland. You can easily get glass or tourist trinkets, but it's hard to find groceries or get your shoes fixed. Running basic errands involves lots of walking and stairs. Imagine crossing over this arched bridge and then half a dozen more while pushing a child in a stroller and carrying a day's worth of groceries. Despite a booming tourist economy and subsidized housing, the city is losing its locals. Venice's population of about 60,000 is just half what it was 30 years ago, and people are leaving at a rate of 1,000 per year. Even the most hopeful city planners worry that, in a few decades, Venice will not be a city at all, but a museum, a cultural theme park, a decaying Disneyland. Be glad you're seeing it while you can.
With that cheery thought, your boat arrives at the Accademia Vaporetto stop. On the right side of the bridge is the Accademia Gallery, filled with the best Venetian paintings. From the Accademia boat stop, look through the graceful bridge and way ahead to enjoy a classic view of the La Salute Church, topped by a crown-shaped dome supported by scrolls. More on this church later. Now, start the next track as your boat leaves the dock.
Accademia. As your boat continues on, keep an eye out on the right side of the canal for a low white building among greenery, about 100 yards past the bridge. This is the Peggy Guggenheim Collection. The American heiress retired here in 1948, moving into this palace that had been left unfinished before the top floors could be built. Peggy Guggenheim, who lived from 1898 to 1979, made her mark as a friend, lover, and patron of modern artists. As a gallery owner, she introduced Europe's avant-garde to a skeptical America. As a collector, she hobnobbed with all the great artists, from Picasso to Pollock. And as a person, she lived larger than life, unconventional and original, with a succession of lovers that gave her a reputation as a female Casanova. Living in this palazzo on the Grand Canal, she decorated the place with paintings and statues by artists she knew personally, like the man on a horse statue on the terrace by Marino Marini. During the 1950s and 1960s, Peggy's palazzo was a mecca for modern artists. She served cocktails to everyone, from the composer Igor Stravinsky to actor Marlon Brando, from the painter Mark Rothko to writer Truman Capote, from poet Allen Ginsberg to Beatle John Lennon and performance artist Yoko Ono. Today, Peggy Guggenheim's home is a museum, decorated much as it was during her lifetime, with one of the best collections of 20th century art anywhere. 2 doors past the Guggenheim, check out the characteristic funnel-shaped chimneys atop the Palazzo Dario. This system forced live embers through a loop-the-loop channel until they were dead. That was essential in the days when stone palaces were surrounded by humble wooden buildings, and a live spark could make a merchant's workforce homeless. 3 doors later is the Salviati building. It's the one with the fine mosaics. It was once a glassworks. As you approach the next stop, notice how higgledy-piggledy palaces like these form a fine skyline that evokes old-time Venice.
At the Santa Maria del Giglio stop, start the next track as your boat pulls away from the dock.
Santa Maria del Giglio. On the way toward the Salute Church, look back on the left-hand side of the canal. That plain brown brick 3-story facade is the ultra-fancy Gritty Palace Hotel. Guests such as Ernest Hemingway and Woody Allen have sat on that terrace and sipped their cappuccinos, enjoying a stunning view across the canal of the domed Salute Church. The Salute Church's official name is the Church of St. Mary of Good Health. It was built to thank Mary for delivering Venetians from the devastating plague of 1630, which killed about a third of the city's population. Mary's statue tops the lantern, and she's dressed as an admiral, hand on a rudder, welcoming ships to the Grand Canal. Even today, Mary's intercession is celebrated every November 21st. That's when Venetians build a temporary floating bridge right here, and you can actually walk across the Grand Canal from the Gritty Palace to the Salute Church, where locals give thanks. Take a deep whiff of Venice. What's all this nonsense about stinky canals? All I smell is... I guess it's my shirt. By the way, how's your captain? Smooth dockings? To get to know him a little better, stand up in the bow and block his view.
Actually, let's don't and say we did. The driver has to look out for another traghetto that crosses the canal at this point. As you approach the Salute Vaporetto stop, start the next track.
Salute. The huge La Salute Church towers overhead, as if squirted from a can of Catholic Cool Whip. The white stone church has a steep dome that rises above a circular structure. It's crusted with Baroque scrolls, leafy Corinthian columns, and 125 statues, including the lovely ladies lounging over the central doorway. In the mid-1600s, the architect Baldassare Longhena remade Venice in the Baroque style, creating this church as well as the Ca' Rezzonico we saw earlier. Longhena built the city's heaviest dome by sinking countless pilings, locals claim over 1 million, into the sandy soil to provide an adequate foundation. The 12 Baroque scrolls at the base function as buttresses to help support the mammoth dome. If you were to climb the seaweed-covered steps and go inside the church, you'd find a pristine octagonal-shaped interior decorated with a few minor works by Titian and Luca Giordano. The crown-shaped La Salute was Longhena's crowning achievement and the last grand Venetian structure built before Venice's decline. As your boat continues on, we approach the point where the Grand Canal opens up into the lagoon and finally reaches St. Mark's Square. By the way, relax for now. We're not getting off at the next stop. The last building on the right, with the golden ball, is the 17th century Customs House. Its two bronze figures of Atlas hold a statue of Fortune riding the ball. Fortune greeted ships as they arrived. Ships docked here to pay their tolls.
The next stop is San Marco, but don't get off here. We'll continue on to the next stop, San Zaccaria, which also serves St. Mark's Square. Even if you're planning to tour the square after our boat ride, the San Zaccaria stop works just fine for that. So for now, stay on the boat and start the next track as you approach the San Marco dock.
San Marco. On the left side of the canal, you'll see the green-pointed tip of the Campanile. This bell tower stands on St. Mark's Square, the political and religious center of Venice. Along the water's edge, a wide promenade leads past elegant hotels to the green area in the far, far distance. This is the public garden, the largest of Venice's few parks, and it hosts the Biennale, a huge art show held every other year. Even further in the distance is the Lido, an island with cars and Venice's beach. Opposite St. Mark's Square, across the water, the dreamy white church that seems to float is San Giorgio Maggiore by the famous architect Palladio. Stretching to the right of San Giorgio Maggiore is the long residential island of Giudecca. As your boat leaves the San Marco dock, the towering Campanile glides behind you, and you pass alongside the bold facade of the Old Mint. This is where Venice's golden ducat, the dollar of the Venetian Republic, was made. Then, twin columns appear, topped by St. Theodore stabbing a dragon and the Lion of St. Mark. Looking between the columns, you glimpse what was for centuries the most important square in Europe, Piazza San Marco. On the far side of the square, two giant figures stand on St. Mark's clock tower, clanging the hour as they have since 1499. As you cruise, the busy domed features of St. Mark's Basilica are eclipsed by the lacy pink facade of the Doge's Palace, the home of Venice's traditional ruler. Just past the Doge's Palace, you'll see the Bridge of Sighs, the skywalk leading from the palace over to the prison. The bridge in front of it is generally packed with gawking tourists. As we approach the last stop on our tour, you may wish to join them in a wistful sigh. At this point, I'd love to wax poetic, but it's time to muscle our way off the boat. See you on shore.
This is the San Zaccaria stop, the end of the line for our trip. Get off the boat here and let Rick say his goodbyes once you're on shore.
San Zaccaria, the tour ends. You're smack dab in the middle of touristy Venice. From here, it's just a short walk back to the Doge's Palace, the Bridge of Sighs, and the center of it all, St. Mark's Square. If you go in the other direction, you'll walk along the grand harborside promenade called the Riva, lined with ritzy hotels. This cruise has been a great overview of the city's grandest canal. Be sure to find time to see the smallest ones. After you see St. Mark's Square, venture away from the tourist hubbub. Wander the back streets, get lost, and find your own private canal with the quiet charm that makes Venice, Venice. We hope you've enjoyed this cruise down the Grand Canal. If you're up for more sightseeing, we have other audio tours available for more Venice sights, including St. Mark's Square, St. Mark's Basilica, and the Frari Church. Remember, this tour was excerpted from the Rick Steves Venice Guidebook, co-authored with Gene Openshaw. For more details on eating, sleeping, and sightseeing in Venice, refer to this year's edition of that guidebook. For more free audio tours and podcasts, and for information about our TV shows, bus tours, and travel gear, visit our website at ricksteves.com. Thanks to Gene Openshaw, the co-author of this tour. This tour was produced by Cedar House Audio Productions. Grazie.
Arrivederci.
And buon viaggio.